Welcome back, sickos, to another episode of Necessary Roughness right here on the Bite Size Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, John Boyd, joined by my co-host, Ben Parker of Sports and Money KC and the Box Score Network. Ben, how you doing, my man?
I'm doing great. We have so much to talk about. Week 5 of the NFL and more happening today. I'm doing great, man.
Yeah, it was a fun one. Starting to get closer to a full picture here. Lee calling a shot. Dennis Allen is probably next, and
Yep.
I might as well pull the segment banner up.
Highly.
Fire sale. This. Well, I'll let you take the reins on this right away. What was your kind of immediate reaction to this? Because this just dropped like mid-morning today, and over the course of the day, you've had a little bit of a chance to digest it. Has your stance changed at all from that kind of initial reaction for you?
Yeah, I think like everybody, my first thought when I saw the Schefter tweet was, oh, crap. Here we go. I am surprised it was week 5, but I'm okay with it. I'm okay with anybody who wanted to let him go during the offseason. I thought that was fine. I was okay with them bringing him back because of the Aaron Rodgers injury. Maybe he didn't get a fair shake, right? But I'm glad they didn't let this go all season. I mean, I'm glad they didn't let this run until Thanksgiving when it's too late to do anything about it. If you're going to kick anybody in the seat of the pants right now and fire anybody up, my only problem with it is that Hackett is still there. That's really my only problem with it.
So there's a lot of conspiracy theories floating around about this, but apparently it was rumored that Saleh was getting close to firing Hackett.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, so that might have played a role in whoever called the final shot. It feels like at least a little bit you're just picking Hackett over Saleh, and Ulbrich is gonna be the interim head coach, so you're still letting Hackett just kind of stay dialed in to the offense because that offense has just been humming. Might as well keep him going. But it's weird. Like, not only are you removing one of the minds of the defense, you're promoting the other one to have more responsibilities and more on his plate than just calling the defense or, lining them up. Like that feels like kind of a double whammy unless they really feel good about, some of the ancillary like members of that defensive staff. But yeah, to me, man, it was surprising right away because, and I wouldn't have had an issue with him going in the offseason either. I think that would have been a lot more prudent because then at that point you can bring in Vrabel, or you could be part of that carousel and bring in a head coach you really feel good about instead of going the interim route and promoting from within, which, there's something to be said for sure. But in season, it's really weird. Like, and there has to have been, like, there's a lot of people kind of like, kind of trying to shut down like everything that was made of that kind of goofy interaction between Rodgers and Saleh during the Patriots game.
So weird.
Like people read his lips in a lot of different ways. Sounded like he said, or it seemed like he said 2-score lead. And that, that was Rodgers' defense. Like, I was just saying 2-score lead. That's something Saleh preaches all the time. And we got one, whatever. But I don't know, it could have been a few other things. Even if that was the case, it seems like more so due to like those couple of back-to-back press conferences where Saleh said, hey, maybe we need to reel in some of the cadence at the line, some of the hard counts, things like that, because of all the false starts they had against Denver. And Rodgers comes to the podium and they relay that to him, what Saleh said, and he was like, yeah, that's one way to do it. Or we could hold players accountable. That is just like, ooh, because there's a lot of football guys who are like, oh, I mean, it's good for your quarterback and your head coach to have conflict, and like
Right.
Bo Nix chirping back at Sean Payton. He loves that, blah, blah, blah. I don't think Rodgers likes any of that,
I don't think so.
and
No.
and that's what I think they felt so sunk into the Rodgers experience that at this point they're like, hey, until he retires, honestly, just whatever he wants. Our chips are in the middle, like screw it. Whatever he thinks needs to happen. All our eggs are in this basket anyway. So let's just go for that. But here's what's interesting to me is, and I sent this to Simon and I were talking about this earlier. And this is a tweet from Ben Solak of ESPN. Since the 2021 season, Saleh's first in New York. The Jets defense is first in points per drive, first in EPA per play, and third in success rate over those several seasons. And we mentioned a little bit pre-show, neither of us feel like he had fingerprints on the offense in any capacity, outside of maybe he had a little bit of a say in like drafting Zach, or just kind of the quarterback search since he got the head coach position. But I don't know, man, when you've got a defensive minded head coach, yeah, he's the one filling out the staff, but how much of that is coming from Woody Johnson saying, we got Rodgers. Rodgers wants this guy who just pissed down his leg in Denver as a head coach. He wants to, get the reunion with this guy. He's going to call his offense. Hackett's not going to try to throw too much motion in there. Rodgers is just going to be able to deal. So because a lot of being a head coach is filling out your staff and kind of being the CEO. And I think even there, like how many of the offensive failings can be put on Saleh like at all? You know what I mean? Like, do you think he would have even had any hand or any, veto power in bringing in Nathaniel Hackett if he thought there was a better candidate? I don't really think so. Oh, here we go.
Bring it on, Lee.
Yeah, Lee, you got that right. Yeah, probably. He was getting ornery. Rodgers was being second guessed. There's also something to Woody Johnson was like a UK ambassador and had like buddies over there. So I think he was really, who was it? It was Mangini on ESPN or something was saying he's going to be really pissed off if he loses this London game because he's got a lot of buddies coming to that game, which is, you can't chalk it all up to that, but that's got to be a factor too. Like he's the one really pulling the trigger. And if it came down to Hackett or Saleh, Rodgers is probably going to pick the guy who's given him zero pushback.
I agree. And I didn't know about the London connection with Woody Johnson, but what I did think earlier in the day was this is owner driven. The owner is sick of this. He was already sick of it for the past 2 years, but he's sick of it now. We're 5 games into the true Aaron Rodgers era, and especially the past 2 weeks, the tragic Denver loss, right? I mean, just troubling. And then I know you had a chance to win that Vikings game, but it wasn't because you played well. It's just because your defense was keeping you in that game, and the Vikings made a couple of mistakes. That's why you were in that game. The Jets did not look good in that game at any point in time. I mean, at no point in time did they look like the Vikings weren't really in control of that game. And so I think the owner was embarrassed. I think he was pissed off over 2 weeks of this, and he was about to chop somebody, maybe 2 somebodies. But for now, it's Saleh. And you hate it that we're in this. This is the new NFL, right? For the past several years now. When the seat gets hot, you've got the GM, the 2 coordinators, and the head coach. Somebody's going to go. It's just a matter of who gets who first.
Yeah, 100%. And generally, it's a coordinator first. Like that's your initial scapegoat.
It is.
Without just completely, turning over the hierarchy there.
Go look at Buffalo.
Yeah, they went right to it though, which is crazy. Like and And yeah, you're coming off of 2 weeks, two frustrating losses for sure, but you held Denver to 10 points, and then you held the Vikings offense to 16. The Jets win by 1 if not for an Andrew Van Ginkel pick six.
Right.
All things being equal. Like coming
Yep.
off of those two defensive performances, again, Saleh mostly has his hand in that. Like they must feel pretty confident that Ulbrich can maintain that level of coaching with this group, and it's a really talented group. Maybe it's not going to take much, but it's baffling to me that when of the two sides of the football, offense is clearly the issue,
Mm-hmm.
and you get rid of the guy who had essentially zero hand in it. Instead of first going to, all right, let's explore a Devontae Adams trade, for example. Let's appease Aaron further, again, without upsetting the entire hierarchy of the team. And like, I don't know that Devontae Adams on that field in Tottenham Hotspur changes the outcome, but I do think he catches that ball that was the game-sealing interception. Like, I think if that's Devontae Adams, just the chemistry those guys have, I think he undercuts it and kind of feels that throw coming. I think that's kind of where Rodgers wanted to put the ball, and he just wanted his receiver to know that. You know what I mean? Like, because Gilmore was on top of him, he wasn't trailing him. You don't put that ball over the top anyway. But if it's Mike Williams, you might as well throw the jump ball as opposed to like it almost wasn't even a back shoulder. It was like an inside shoulder that he wanted him to just come underneath and kind of stop pushing upfield. So Devontae Adams might make a catch like that. Just that kind of backyard football kind of chemistry he has with him. But I don't know if it changes the outcome. But if you were to go make that move, I don't know. Yeah, again, I don't know why you don't appease Rodgers further without, kind of doing the most contentious thing you could do, because Saleh showed up to work today. Showed up to the facility.
Of course he did.
All the Jets defenders were flabbergasted from everything I've heard. He wasn't given the opportunity to address the team upon his departure. Probably didn't stop into HR on the way out.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently he was escorted out by security.
That's what I heard too.
So what are we doing? Like this is just, regardless of the ultimate decision, how it was handled seems to have been ridiculously unprofessional. And I at this point, you kind of just hope they spiral out and nothing gets better. Just so they learn a little bit. Like, hey man, don't just alienate half your roster, the half that's playing much better.
Right.
Because those are Saleh's guys at this point. I don't think he lost that half of the locker room. He might have only lost 1/53rd of the locker room, frankly. But I don't know. I didn't like it. Yeah. I don't like it. Like you said though at the top, like in a vacuum, I don't disagree with going with a coaching change. Like things aren't working. This is just a really goofy time to do it, in my opinion. If I'm not mistaken, they don't have a bye this week. Are they one of the teams going into a bye?
I don't think they are, but I would have to.
I don't think they are.
Check that.
It's Buffalo this upcoming week. I want to say
they've got an extra night, yeah, because it's a Monday night, or they had an extra day to work with. But that's it. They don't get the bye, yeah.
Right. Yep. Yeah, they played Buffalo on the 14th. So I don't know. It's a goofy time to make a big transition like that. And yeah, I agree, Lee. Like it's a billionaire's stupidity and hubris and hair trigger just kind of getting the best of them. And I think too, again, they're catering to Rodgers and just saying, all right, well, whatever you want, man. Just don't darkness retreat on us. Stay around. I think they're just going down with that ship. that is Aaron Rodgers at this point. And it's, like I said, all the eggs are in that basket. It's kind of all they can really do. Do you think this will do anything positive for the Jets going forward? Like if there was a real, if it was really contentious between Rodgers and Saleh, really the two foremost leaders of your team, your starting quarterback, your head coach. If that was the case, do you think anything positive comes out of this for New York? Are they able to turn it around? They can take the division lead with a win against Buffalo this week.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad they did it. I'm glad they did it now. I'm glad they didn't let it linger for 4 more weeks. But do I actually think this is going to change anything? No. The offensive line is still struggling a lot. Aaron Rodgers is still kind of looking for that second receiver to throw to. I mean, he's catching Lazard sometimes, but for the most part, it's Wilson or nothing, right? So it's not going to change those things. And Hackett's still the OC. So, no, I wish, Saleh or not, I wish Hackett was out. And I realize why he's still there. But no, I don't ultimately think this is going to change a whole heck of a lot, really.
No, it doesn't seem like it. There's not. Rodgers is still making some throws. Don't get me wrong. He probably had 2 of the greatest incomplete passes I've ever seen in my life on Sunday morning.
And he does every week.
Like the one, the one to Lazard that just bricks. And there was another one to the end zone that was just like, I think it was to Conklin, who's like blanketed. It's like triple coverage. And they show the slow-mo. Like when you watch it real time, you're like, oh, he fired that into a mess of purple. What's he doing? And then they show the slow-mo replay, and you can't even see his body from behind the defenders, but you see the hands of Conklin, and the ball just hits it, right? The only place he could have thrown it. So he's still got some juice. I think he's playing a little more skittish than we've seen him in the past, and maybe that's just a function of playing against the Denver defense and then the Vikings defense in back-to-back weeks. But I don't know. There's some chinks in the armor there. I don't think he's going to be able to RELAX this season. It does, because I don't think he's going to be able to put the cape on the way he has in the past. And he doesn't have the weapons to do so at this point. So I don't know. It's looking rough. Interim coaches always seem to get a good week or two from team. That is true. Steve Wilkes had a great run in Carolina. Pierce when he was interim. Rich Bisaccia in following the Gruden firing. Definitely. And I'm sure if that was the decision internally, I'm sure the players, are pretty receptive of what Ulbrich brings and his voice in the locker room. It's got to be the case. I think a lot, because there was 15 minutes after the initial firing news where we're like, oh Christ, Hackett's going to get the interim HC job, isn't he?
I know.
But he didn't, and that probably speaks to, the command of the locker room that he doesn't have, and he's just kind of, Rodgers' headset buddy, and that's going to stay the same at this point. So I don't know, man. It's timing's weird. The optics are very weird around the way it was handled. Like I said, I don't hate the decision in a vacuum to move on from a coach or whatever, but it doesn't look good from an outside perspective, and everything we've heard just sounds like it wasn't handled properly. But a team that might have had a hand in this decision is my Minnesota Vikings across the pond on the unideal Tottenham Hotspur misty turf. The Jets, again, couldn't get anything going on offense. The Vikings were able to dictate the pace of this game from a defensive standpoint. The Jets 2.6 yards a carry, and they really gave up on it at a certain point. They ran the ball 14 times for 2.6. Rodgers dropped back 57 times, was sacked 3 times, threw 3 interceptions. That exact same pressure look that baited him into the Andrew Van Ginkel interception, they ran that exact same pressure look 3 times, at least in that game. And I could have missed 1 or 2. And another time they ran it was on that final drive when Garrett Wilson kind of did the off-schedule double move on the outside on Gilmore that Aaron overthrew. That was that same exact 7-up look. Van Ginkel over the right guard. He kind of feigns the blitz, does the two-step and drop, and they're running stick to the passing strike, but it's instead of a slant, it's Tyler Conklin on a little curl. And that was his first read. And Van Ginkel drops right into the passing window again. Rodgers gets really spooked, hangs onto the pump fake, and then you see him just rush the shit out of this throw to Garrett Wilson because he probably thinks he's going to be hot again off the edge. Harrison Smith tattooed him earlier in the game from the blind side. And so he pumps it and then just flings it up for Garrett Wilson as soon as he sees a little bit of separation, overthrows him on a ball that is an Aaron Rodgers touchdown in just about any other year since 2009. And I think he was really flustered. I think he was really frustrated. It doesn't seem like he trusts his offensive line. It doesn't seem like he trusts his play caller as much as he seems married to him. But it was just weird. And this is funny, Lee. We actually mentioned this right at the top, and it's like that's very different because Peyton's on record saying he likes that kind of shit. He liked when Drew Brees would fire back at him and kind of like show some passion, contend with them for what he thinks they should do. And that's why he wanted to draft a 33-year-old quarterback or however old he is. He wanted a guy who is going to know the playbook in and out, is going to have the maturity and things like that to give him some pushback if he disagrees with what's going on out there, or, hey, no, this is what I'm seeing and I trust what I'm seeing. Let's work on that. It feels very different when you draft a rookie who you've vetted, who you've interviewed, who the coach brings in and says, this is the guy I want to work with, as opposed to what we can assume happened in New York, where Saleh didn't have as much of a say, but he was willing to ride with it. And Saleh doesn't seem to be as keen on, oh yeah, please give me pushback. Please, subvert my authority on TV. But also that back and forth with he and Rodgers is, I think it was almost the opposite of Nick's going to Peyton and say, and giving him pushback, saying, no, this is what we need to do, blah, blah, blah. It was kind of Saleh rocking the boat with Rodgers, saying, hey man, all that fancy cadence shit you've been doing for 14 years that's gotten you all these free plays on these offsides, that you have the command of this offense to do. Let's tone that down a little bit because my other guys aren't getting it. And Rodgers said, right, yeah, or we could hold players accountable. And so that back and forth felt like, just kind of opposite ends of that Peyton-Nick spectrum, both in that it's a 40-year-old quarterback and a young-ish head coach, in his fourth season as a head coach now, but not a super old guy, as opposed to Peyton, who's much older, right. Nick's who's a rookie. Yep. I think that dynamic's just very, very opposite. So I don't think there's much to make of the Peyton-Nick stuff right now. I think that's them just kind of sorting shit out. But this was just apocalyptic, those two having a disagreement, because I think Rodgers went barking up the Woody Johnson tree and shook some leaves down. So we'll see how they recover. But that Vikings team, and I wrote about this for Zone Coverage, they proved in this game that they can win ugly. They can win without, and they did have a 3-score lead at one point in this game. Don't get me wrong, but they can win without having this big, big lead that they really just have to manage and maintain for the rest of the game. They can win when they have 4 penalties on special teams, one of which nullified a 3-and-out and led to a field goal for the Jets. They can do this when the offense is just not getting anything going. Darnold 14 for 31 on the day. Aaron Jones was rushing for over 4 yards a carry until he went down. And then the combination of Ty Chandler and Myles Gaskin with 16 carries for 32 yards throughout the rest of the game. And the turf wasn't conducive to many sharp cuts from everything I've heard. You know, the running game sputtered out kind of on for both teams. But when it came down to it, this is the first time all season that this Vikings defense has had their backs against the wall on defense while the other team has an opportunity to drive down and win the game. The Vikings have trailed for 3 total minutes all season, and they were all against the New York Giants in week 1. 4 straight weeks without trailing for a second. And now they were finally back down. They're in the high red zone. Aaron Rodgers is under center, and a touchdown wins the game for the Jets, loses it for the Vikings, and they make a stand, and the defense is able to bail out the other 2 phases of the game on a day where neither of those 2 were acceptable, frankly. And a lot of that has to do with the Jets defense that played out of its skull. Everybody on that, especially the defensive backs. DJ Reed was insane. Sauce Gardner missed a little bit of time with a slight injury, and there were some ticky-tack pass interference calls, you know. But I mean, even so, they had some pass breakups. They were running more man coverage against the Vikings and Justin Jefferson than he's probably seen since his rookie year. Like, it was unbelievable what they were able to do. Just talent versus talent, and the way Saleh was calling it. And now he's gone, and you wonder if they can maintain that same level of intensity. But huge win for the Vikings to win ugly. And the Chiefs continue to win ugly. These games are just, you know, it's not a lot of the big explosives. It's just very sound decision making from Mahomes. Like, Mahomes' final line was like, you know, a little bit over 300 yards, no touchdowns, and a pick. But that was one of the best quarterback games I've seen all season. Like, the way he rescues the pocket on the game-sealing drive, that scramble to get the first down was unreal. Some of the throws he made were ridiculous. The backyard chemistry's back with Kelsey. They're doing hook and ladder plays on the 3rd and 21 to get 20 yards and almost get it. And the defense is really, really locked in. What did you see from this game in particular? And, you know, how has the theme of this Chiefs season, you know, kind of continued? Like, because this sort of game where they really just grind it out, it was close for most of the time, but it never felt too in doubt. It's just been thematic of the entire season where they're not blowing you out. You know, it's not 2019. It's a much, much different team, but the guy under center, the couple of guys with the headsets on, and that defense are just, you know, it's death taxes and Mahomes and Spags and Andy Reid at this point. What have you seen from the Chiefs so far this season? And how do you feel about them compared to all the other championship Chiefs teams we've seen over the Mahomes tenure?
It looks a lot similar to last year. I'm going to trot out an old take that I've mentioned on here before. This Chiefs team, this Chiefs current franchise, past 4 or 5 years, it is Patriots 2.0 all over again. How many times do we see the Patriots year after year struggle in September only to win the Super Bowl? Not only that, how many times did we see the Patriots enter the playoffs and look like the 3rd best team in the AFC and still win the whole championship? I mean, the reason for it is you have a great coach with a great quarterback and a good general manager. They are not flawless. They've got plenty of flaws. I mean, they don't just have little ones. They got big ones to work on, and yet they're winning. I got to watch the first half of the Manning Manning telecast with Belichick and the Manning brothers, and they did an excellent, wonderful job talking about that game. But one thing they kept mentioning was that Kansas City doesn't typically make a whole lot of mistakes. They do all the little things right. So once you're making very few mistakes, along with great coach, great quarterback, a defense that knows what it wants to do, and an offense that has plenty of good players on it, even though the wide receiver room is struggling. When you put all that together, you're going to win a whole heck of a lot more games than you're going to lose. And even when you get to the playoffs and you have zero momentum, which they had no momentum last year when they got to the playoffs. But when you get to the playoffs and you have no momentum, you can win because you're good. And nothing stands out, you know. I still think this defense can be challenged a lot by good offenses and can be challenged by the fact that they don't have L'Jarius Sneed anymore. We just haven't had that yet this year. But that's why they're winning. They have plenty of flaws, but they're winning because of all those things that I just mentioned.
Yeah, and when you are a team that is so sound and doesn't make mistakes, the mistakes the other team makes are magnified because you're going to take care of the ball. You're going to squeeze them on defense and make things tough. You're going to control time of possession. And also, when it's close and it gets late, you've got these ace in the hole calls on both sides of the ball that you've been able to hone over 6-7 seasons with, continuity on both sides of the ball from the play callers, quarterback, one of the best tight ends of all time. When it gets close, it just still feels so inevitable. And that's very Patriots. That's very
It is.
the first 2 decades of the century Patriots. And the torch passing was at like, I never buy into any of the NFL is scripted hullabaloo, or
Right.
of course the Chiefs are going to win. Look at the ref made this call and he knew this, and it's like, okay, what are the 106 professional athletes? Are they just all doing this for what, an extra couple $100,000? But anyway, the like passing of the torch in the AFC from the Brady Patriots winning in 2018, knocking the Chiefs out that season, and then as Mahomes rises, the Chiefs become that team, and Brady goes to the Bucs and beats them before he rides off into the sunset, and then he's like, okay, now you can go, now you can win some. Now I'm done.
Now it's your turn.
That script seems a little too good to be true. You know what I mean? Like just that Patriots
took it from me because I don't want it anymore. Yes.
Yeah, here you go, man. It's all you. So I do think that comparison's very, very on the nose. But yeah, it's just a solid football team. They know how to execute. Continuity, like I said, is huge, and until they're not, they're gonna feel inevitable. Like, yeah, you might say what I've seen from the Ravens so far looks like higher ceiling, when they're really beating teams up, and the way that defense can look, especially if like Nate Wiggins and guys like that, if Kyle Van Noy keeps turning the clock back for Baltimore, like they have a lot of things going where you're like, oh, I might power rank them ahead of the Chiefs right now because the Chiefs are kind of squeaking through some of these games, or when the Bills aren't down to their 7th string off-ball linebacker and what they can do on offense, you might like the Bills more sometimes. What the Texans do, you might like them a little bit more on paper, but they still have to slay the dragon. And the Chiefs can roll in there. Home field advantage would be great, but yeah, they could roll in there as a 3 seed, and it's just going to be really tough to pick against them until you see it.
Yeah, and again, not to beat the Patriots horse too much here, but I can't tell you, because I'm old now and I watched every year of those Patriots teams, I can't tell you how many years I looked at the Patriots and said, they've got flaws, they're beatable, but the rest of the AFC turned out to be weaker. They just couldn't step up and take take the reins on that particular years. And so the better football team, the Patriots, because they had Brady and they didn't make mistakes and they had a good defensive game plan, they won. And there were years that they were beatable and they didn't get beat because nobody else stepped up for it.
And the only guy who really cracked that code is Steve Spagnuolo when he was coaching those Giants defenses.
That's a great
So that's
point.
another funny.
I forgot about that.
That's another funny wrinkle.
I was going to say Eli. Yeah, but you're right.
Yeah. But yeah, it was what Spags did with, Justin Tuck and Strahan and Umenyiora and Jason Pierre-Paul eventually in 2011. So that's another funny, like, weird little connection where it's like, all right, now Spags is, guiding one of the best units in football for the next dynasty. So it's just the parallels are really, really interesting. We've got a couple of should be or would be AFC contenders to talk about, and this is exactly why the Chiefs still should be the favorites, because of how these two teams handled the end of the game in very winnable games. Bengals blow multiple 10-point leads throughout the course of the game. The offense is on fire. The defense is Swiss cheese, of course, but down the stretch, winnable game. What the Bills did at the end of the game against Houston was reprehensible. You get the ball back inside your own 5, were they on the 6, something like that? You get the ball
something
back.
Like that, yeah.
They put you in a coffin corner. It's like 28 seconds left on the game clock, something like that. Tie ball game. Yeah. And you throw the ball and stop the clock 3 consecutive times, punt out of your own end zone, and allow them to get into field goal range and beat you in regulation. Yeah, take a shot or two. For sure. For sure. You got Josh Allen back there. Take a shot or two. Try to get out of the back of the end zone, so if you're punting, it's more advantageous. You're gonna win the field position battle a little better. Take a shot because it's Josh Allen and he can get it over the defense if they make a mistake. But don't take 3 of them. At least one of those plays has to be mesh or a little tunnel screen or a run up the gut with James Cook or Ray Davis and Ty Johnson have ran the ball fine. Like, this running game is okay. You don't have to resort to this. And I was watching this in real time, and I was like, no way they're going to punt this ball away with time on the clock. And they do it, and they get into Kaimi Fairbairn range and beat him in regulation. I could not believe that sequence at the end of the game. Did you watch that one live? Texans Bills?
I didn't watch it live. I went back and watched it. So if I say something that misses a little bit of context, but I didn't get to go back and watch the whole ending there.
Yeah, it was rough. And then honestly, what you saw from Cincy, they already had their 38. Burrow has 5 touchdowns at this point in the game. You're having trouble running the football, sure. You're up with a chance to really put the game all the way away. I think it was 38-35 at this point. Bengals driving. Could be wrong. Could be 38-31. I can't remember if they got the field goal first. But it was 38-28 at one point. Or no, it was. It was 38-28, and then Lamar did that insane play that he scrambles out and hits likely in the back of the end zone after he just baptizes Sam Hubbard. So it's 38-35. You get the ball back, a chance to really put it away where they're not going to have enough time to get back into it, and that's when you throw the interception and give them the ball back with a chance to tie it up, which they do. That was rough. And like, these teams have as high, if not a higher ceiling than the Chiefs as constructed, especially with Rashee Rice out, especially with Kelsey slowing down a tiny bit. Mahomes' low ADOT. Like, the Chiefs, again, are well-oiled, but what you saw from Burrow and Higgins and Chase and what you've seen from Josh Allen slinging it to when Khalil Shakir's healthy, the good moments from Keon Coleman, that running game they have. The Chiefs have no Pacheco right now. Hunt had a decent game, but that running game isn't what it has been. Well, you're looking at two offenses that really should be able to challenge them, and they just don't execute down the stretch the same way. And you can imagine it would have been the same sort of thing, if not exacerbated, against the Chiefs, especially in January. Like it's just tough to trust. And the Ravens were the one that came back. Maybe it's the Ravens again this year, and we see another rematch. But I don't know, man. It's just tough to, with all the evidence we have, it's really, really tough to say definitively this is the year they'll be dethroned, because it just feels like the Jesse Pinkman, they can't keep getting away with this thing, and that's what's in your head. It's like, you're right. If you flip a coin 50 times and the first 4 heads, you're like, well, tails is coming, and it might not. This team might just get out of the AFC again, the way it looks right now. All right, we've got 2 more games I wanted to highlight. If you're in the chat and there's we haven't talked about your favorite team, or there's another interesting game you want us to get to, feel free to drop that in the comments. And also feel free to comment on what you saw in this game, the Giants. And Keebler's not here to get on his soapbox. I'm going to do it a little bit for him. This is another team that and I said this about the Vikings in the preseason. I just felt like the floor was a lot higher than people were giving them credit for, with how well coached they were, and the really evenly spread out quality veteran talent. The Giants' high-end talent is much more spotty, but their high-end talent is also Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns. Deonte Banks has played really, really well. They've got some pretty heavy hitters on that side of the ball. Andrew Thomas, all pro caliber. Malik Neighbors, ridiculous. They didn't even have him for this game against Seattle.
Right.
And what Dable has been able to do in 2022, of course, fell off a little bit last year. But what he's able to do to kind of set the floor for your running game, I think, is great. As the play caller on that side, it's not, to my understanding, he's back calling plays again. He wasn't for a little bit there. But this game, and the Seahawks have a little bit of a Lions hangover they could blame it on. They're not healthy on the offensive line, and it felt like they were going to still win this game. Giants up 23-20. Seahawks start driving. They can't put 6 on the board, but they line up for a field goal that would have tied it. Giants would have had a chance to drive back down the field, a little bit of time left in regulation. But the kick gets blocked, and apparently he didn't push off the long snapper. He jumped straight over him.
Right.
The snapper was kind of pulled down by the defensive lineman, which was an interesting little tactic. You could see he's kind of got him held down so he can't get his head up and make contact with the jumper. But the guy completely Cam Chancellors him and blocks that kick, decks the kicker on his way there. It gets returned for a touchdown, 29-20. This was a wild, wild finish. And, I mean, this might have knocked people out of a lot of King of the Hill leagues, picking Seattle to come back after a tough loss, after putting up, what was it, by the end of that game, 30-something on Detroit. To come back home and lay an egg like this is tough, but I think you got to give more credit to the Giants than you do, demerit to the Seahawks. Like they're missing Abraham Lucas on the right side of that offensive line. That's tough to deal with. They've had some other injuries up there. They're missing Byron Murphy for the second straight week third straight week. But they didn't have him against the Lions either. You're missing Boye Mafe, former Gopher Skyuma, but might be your two best pass rushers, or two of the three probably. And then I think no Julian Love as well for this game, former Giant. So they've got some issues going on there. But for the Giants to battle back, stay in this one, slam the door shut at the end. And Keebler tried to, he didn't give us much context, but he did make the argument that the Giants should be 4-1 in our Discord. And that's not crazy. The Washington game was about as fluky of an NFL game as you'll see. They were the first team since 1987 to lose a game in which they scored 3 touchdowns and the other team scored 0. Well, hopefully they learned from it, but ideally you're not going to only have one active kicker who missed practice that week with a hamstring issue. Hamstring, pretty important to kicking. Pulls it again on the opening kickoff. You don't have him all game, and you still outpace Washington for most of this game. You keep them out of the end zone. And looking back on that, that's a little more impressive than you thought at the time with what Jaden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury have put together in the following weeks. So you look at that game, that's certainly one. The Vikings game, of course, was no contest. I mean, that's not the one we're talking about. But I'm going to pull up the Cowboys game. That's a game they probably should have won as well. They had chance after chance, and it was a little goofy down the stretch for sure. But they fought tooth and nail in that game too, and very, very easily could have gone the other way. So you're right. Like, Keebler's kind of right. If the ball rolls a different way for a couple weeks, this team very well could be 4-1. And I think they're playing at a much higher level than people would have thought. No Malik Neighbors for this game. Okay, here Darius Slayton go for 100. Like, this is a little bit of a better team than people thought. And for Seattle, like, we talked about them when they were 3-0, the competition they'd faced. Not as impressive as the other 3-0 teams at the time, even Pittsburgh at the time. But I still think that's a very good team, even with their injuries, with Geno under center and the weapons he has at his disposal. It's a very good team to beat for the Giants. So I was pretty impressed with them. I think Seattle will be okay, but the way the NFC West looks, the way the NFC East looks, that could have been 2 playoff teams for all we know at this point. You know what I mean? Like, so that one was just crazy. Anything else stick out to you in the Giants pulling that upset?
Seattle shouldn't have lost this game. They're the better team. Listen, I know they're banged up, but half the NFL is banged up, man. And, half of those banged up teams are winning, not losing, especially not losing a team like the Giants. But hats off to Brian Dable. This team reminds me of the team we saw 2 years ago that is hitting above its weight class. Let's be clear. The Giants, while they have some talent, do not have the talent to be going on the road and winning games like this, and yet they are doing it. And they have a chance. Keebler's right. They could have a better record than even they've got. Brian Dable's doing a heck of a job. He may get fired at the end of the year just for a losing record again, but I'm campaigning for them not to fire him. Let the GM go if you have to. They don't yet have enough talent. This guy, Brian Dable, offense and defense, makes more out of what he's got than just about anybody else in the league right now. And the Giants don't have enough. And yet they're competing every week, and they're winning their share, and they could have won more. You're 100% right. In this game specifically, hats off to the Giants. I love the energy. I love them being able to go on the road and win a game like this. I'm still on the side of the Seattle is a fraud bit because I know what personnel Seattle has right now, even when they're healthy, and I know what a weak schedule they've played. There is nobody in the history of the NFL that has played 4 teams this week in the first 5 weeks of the season. But Seattle's winning right now too. So they're 3-2. Both teams got a chance, and you're right. These could be 2 playoff teams. If they scratch their way through, they could be 2 playoff teams. So we'll see. The NFC is even weaker than we thought. The AFC is weaker than we thought. There's more parity across the board than we thought. And these two teams are scratching and fighting. So hats off to them.
Yeah, and this wouldn't be the first time that Dable turned chicken shit into chicken pot pie and made a little playoff run. Like, not out of the question. And I think you're entirely right too. Like, especially if this team, like if they're feisty all year, I think it speaks to Dable as a leader that he clearly hasn't lost this locker room one bit. These guys are still going out there and playing hard as hell. They're scrapping, they're clawing, they are punching above their weight class, like you said. They're gonna be a tough out, and especially if they're one of those teams kind of playing, maybe mathematically eliminated. Maybe they're 6-9 going into their last two. They might be playing spoiler and succeeding towards the end of the season. It feels like one of those teams that if they're not in it, they're going to be ruining somebody's day come week 17 and 18.
Kind of an elimination game this week between the Giants and the Bengals. Cincinnati, sitting there at 1-4, yeah. Giants 2-3. The loser of this game isn't going to feel too good, but the winner's going to be like, hey, momentum, baby.
And another probably more egregious upset is the Niners losing at home to the Cardinals on a game-winning field goal. Man, like this Cardinals team has been impressive, and this is another coaching job from Gannon that I think is really, really underrated. And he's been doing a great job since he got there. Just kind of like what they leaned into when Kyler was hurt, all that 12, 13 personnel, and just beating you up with James Conner. They haven't lost that identity while injecting Kyler back into the offense. They're still kicking your ass with James Conner. They're still running out, some heavier personnel and doing some creative things off of that. Gannon, for what the talent level is on defense, has them playing really, really good football. It's Buda Baker and a prayer, and it has been for a while. Like Keitrell Clark Phillips. One of those guys is on this team, and he made a great play in this game to save a touchdown. Yes. Okay. Nice. It was some sort of Clark was around there. I knew it. But they're playing really well as a unit and better than the sum of their parts. And I think that's a huge, like kind of badge of honor for a coach. If like what Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores are doing for the Vikes, what Spagnuolo and the Chiefs have done with all this day 3 talent in the secondary and at the second level, and what they've been able to concoct, out of those groups. It's the same kind of stuff going on in Arizona right now, and Kyler Murray kind of bringing that all together. Like, how about that? It must have been a 50, 60-yard rushing touchdown. He's at the 40, and he's already like Deion Sandersing his shot. He's pointing to the end zone. He knows he's gone. Having that like breakout element where you can just turn a game on its head at quarterback, in addition to this really sound kick your ass running game and a defense that again is playing better than the sum of its parts. This is a pretty good football team. And I know the Niners have had, some lapses this season, but they still have like the second or third best Super Bowl odds in Vegas. Like, this is a very good team you went on the road and beat in your division. That's a pretty big win.
So Vegas still likes the 49ers. You can see it in the matchups that they're doing, the batted over unders, and then the overall odds. Most of that's probably counting on Shanahan to kick it in and McCaffrey to come back. But listen, this Arizona Cardinals team, they're dangerous. The one determinant factor on whether or not they can turn this into a winning season is the defense. Right now, they're about 25th, 26th in terms of almost any defensive number you want to look at. That's about where they're hovering. If they can improve that to middle of the pack, You can see already they're going to get enough offense to support victories. They're going to get 20, 24, 27 points a game, depending on the week. But that defense has got to get more middle of the pack-ish in order to give them a better chance in these games. If it slides, though, if that defense slides back to, say, 29 and 30th, forget it. It's going to be another long year for the Cardinals. Right now, they're mixing it up, though. Love it. Love to see it.
Yeah, they're kind of NFC Bengals right now. You know, like if they can get you in a shootout, it's anybody's game, right?
Are the Cardinals and Bengals playing each other this year? I didn't even check to see.
Oh, Christ, I hope so. I really hope so. They played AFC East. That could be a random cross matchup because they were probably both fourth in the division last year. Yeah, they might. It's not out of the question. But that's all we got for you for this episode of Necessary Roughness. Thank you to everybody who jumped into the chat. Lee, as always. Nate, thanks for popping in. All of you guys window shopping as well. Thanks so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it while you're here. Or if you're watching from Twitter or Facebook, whatever it may be, go over to YouTube. Do us a favor, hit that subscribe button. We are pushing towards 1,000. We'd love to hit that over the course of the NFL season. We will be here every single Tuesday night at 9/8 Central, doing about an hour live, just talking about the preceding week's slate like we did here today. And we've also got a bunch more going on the channel. We've got a fantasy show, another damn fantasy podcast every Wednesday night. And on Thursdays, we have, until we get to the NBA season, it's Supersized Sports. And once we do, it'll be The Bounce, our flagship NBA program as well. Ben, before we get out of here, let the people know where they can find your excellent work as well.
I appreciate it. As always, I've enjoyed it. Go Vikings. Hope the luck continues there for you guys. Next, I am recording Odds on Favorite with Robertson Buyer. It'll come out usually late Wednesday night or early Thursday morning. You can find us on Apple and Spotify. You can find such, give me 1 second, you can find such entertaining segments as the Toughness Award, the Fantasy Corner, Betting Props, Guessing with Buyer, 3 Up, 3 Down, and my favorite, the Dipstick of the Week.
Enthralling segment titles. Those are excellent. And do check that all out. Those are really fun shows to check on. And you can find me here, of course. You might find me on various other Vikings shows here and there. Minnesota Sports Talk at times. Sounds like I'll be on the Love Boat podcast, the Zone Coverage podcast pretty soon. But until then, you can find all my written work covering the Vikings on zonecoverage.com/Vikings. It's the bye week, so I'm going to have a lot of fun film breakdowns that I'll have more time to get to. Might even get to some offensive film for the first time this year. Who knows? I've been really honed in on Flores and everything he's concocted. But in the meantime, leave us a like, hit that subscribe button. Leave a posthumous comment if you'd like once the show, the stream actually ends. That would help juice the algorithm a little bit too. But again, thanks so much for tuning in. This has been Necessary Roughness on the Bite Size Sports Network. We'll see you guys next week.